Hello, everyone. Welcome to Hyperspace on Dark Matter Radio. I'm your host, Miss Solaris BlueRaven. I want to thank everybody for tuning in this evening, and of course, a special thank you to webmaster and producer Keith Rowland. And my special guest this evening is Gary A. David. Gary A. David has been an independent researcher of Southwestern archaeological ruins and rock art for nearly 25 years. His books about the ancestral Pueblo cultures of Arizona and New Mexico include The Orion Zone, Ancient Star Cities of the American Southwest, Eye of the Phoenix, Mysterious Visions and Secrets of the American Southwest, The Kivas of Heaven, Ancient Hopi Starlore, and Star Shrines and Earthworks of the Desert Southwest. These are all available from Adventures and Unlimited Press. And Mr. David earned a master's degree from the University of Colorado and is a formal college professor. He is also a poet with numerous volumes published and a professional lead guitarist and vocalist. His articles or interviews have appeared in many magazines, including Ancient American Atlantis Rising, Fate Fenix in Italy, Mysteries of Greece, Sagenhafte Zeiten, Switzerland, Erich von Däniken's Legendary Times, a UFO and World Explorer, as well as in anthologies such as Underground, The Disinformation Guide to Ancient Civilizations, and 2 Graham Hancock Readers, Lost Knowledge of the Ancients, and Mysteries of the Ancient Past. Gary continues to give lectures and international radio interviews, including on Coast to Coast AM with George Noory, Dreamland with Whitley Strieber, Jeff Rense, and many others. He has appeared on the History Channel's series Ancient Aliens, Brad Meltzer's Decoded, Countdown to Apocalypse, and the Japanese TV program Cosmo Space of America, and the Russian TV show Battle Civilizations with Igor Prokopenko. And his website is www.theorionzone.com, and his email is garydavid52@hotmail.com. And please welcome Gary to the show this evening. Gary, how are you doing?
I'm fine, Solaris. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. Great to have you here tonight. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, and so much information. I'd like to talk a little bit about, you have a forthcoming book called Mirrors of Orion, The Star Knowledge of the Ancient World. Is that ready to be going live soon?
That's within the next couple of weeks. That will be out, available on Amazon. And, that's more of a global outlook. For the last 15 or so years, I've been doing the Southwest, the American Southwest, and the Hopi, and the Zuni, and the Pueblo people in this region. But I found a lot of star correlations all over the globe, and this new book will deal with that.
Very interesting. And can you elaborate a little bit on that? The star correlations?
Well, the star correlation, I found out about these star correlations really back. I'd have to go back like 25 years ago, and I was living in the Black Hills of South Dakota, and I was working with the Lakota Sioux, and I met a woman named Charlotte Black Elk, and she's the great-granddaughter of the Sioux chief that wrote Black Elk Speaks, that famous Native American classic. And, she was talking about these star correlations, the particular star correlation that the Lakota Sioux had was involved the constellation Orion, and a couple other constellations, the Pleiades and Sirius. And the way she described this star correlation is that the backbone of a great celestial buffalo was Orion's belt. And the nose of this celestial buffalo was the Pleiades in the constellation Taurus. And the tail of this buffalo was Sirius in Canis Major. So this huge constellation across the sky represented certain points on the Earth in the Black Hills of South Dakota. Now, your listeners might know that the Black Hills is the place where Mount Rushmore is. A lot of people have visited Mount Rushmore, and now they're still carving the Crazy Horse Monument in the Black Hills as well. It's a very sacred space for the Lakota Sioux. It's really the center of their universe, the center of the cosmos for the Lakota people on the Great Plains. And Charlotte described this Earth-to-sky relationship. There are certain stars in this great celestial constellation, the celestial buffalo, that corresponded to certain spots on the Earth that the Lakota migrated to. They made an annual migration all across the and around the Black Hills. They made a stop at a certain place at a certain time of the year, and they did a certain ceremony in their ritual cycle. For instance, they did the sun dance at what is now known as Devil's Tower, which, of course, this was the filming of Close Encounters of a Third Kind was filmed there at Devil's Tower. But this was a sacred Lakota place, and it corresponded to one of the stars in the constellation, this celestial buffalo. So this idea of as above, so below, this ancient Egyptian maxim, this saying that the stars, reflect places on the earth, or the mankind or humankind builds places on the earth to reflect these particular stars.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like they're lighthouses, summoning the ancients.
Oh yeah, they're really getting the stellar energy down from the cosmos, and they're getting this particular energy of each star. Like the belt stars of Orion have a certain celestial energy that they want to be at a certain place within the Black Hills at a certain time to get this energy of this constellation. Mm-hmm. So that idea more or less was planted in my mind when I was living in South Dakota. I lived there for about 15 years, and then I moved down to Arizona, and it's a totally different region. Of course, it's the Native Americans in this area are basically agrarian. They're farmers. The Hopi and Zuni and other Pueblo tribes, they're basically corn growers. They grow corn, beans, and squash, and they live in sedentary places. They didn't live in teepees like the Lakota on the Great Plains. Mm-hmm. So it's a totally different situation. However, I discovered another star correlation, right here in Arizona. The thing that probably triggered that was reading Robert Bauval's book, The Orion Mystery. Mm-hmm. And this, of course, a lot of your listeners will be familiar with the star correlation of the three major pyramids on the Giza Plateau, and the way they correspond to the belt stars of Orion. It's a one-to-one correspondence between these three stars of the belt and the Great Pyramid and the other two smaller pyramids. Mm-hmm. I read that in 1997. I read that, and I was going up to the Hopi Mesas. That's the place where the Hopi live in northern Arizona. 3 primary mesas. And I was driving up there for a Kachina dance, which is an annual agricultural dance that's performed, starting in the spring and through one part of the summer until just after the summer solstice. They stop the Kachina dances. Mm-hmm. But I was driving up there for the dances, and I just read Bauval's book, and I thought, well, maybe there's an Orion correlation right here in Arizona. And so I put that in the back of my mind and went up to the dances on the Hopi Mesas. And, I came home from the dances, and I got out a star chart and got out a map of Arizona. And I realized that these 3 primary mesas could correspond to an Orion correlation. But not only that, each major star in the constellation Orion was represented perfectly by a certain village site, a ruin site or village site that the Hopi had inhabited or were currently inhabiting. Mm. So each star was represented on the Arizona desert, and the pattern was nearly exact. There was a one-to-one correspondence between sky and earth, and this just kind of set me on a path to study all these ruin sites and go to these places and photograph these places and soak up the psychic and celestial energy from each of these places. Mm. and try to write this down.
Yeah, and how magnificent that is. Oh, beautiful power spots. I have friends that are actually associated with the Lakota tribe, and they told me about the Devil's Tower and ceremony there. I don't know what that background noise is. Is that you?
I don't know.
Shuffling paper or something? So it sounds like. Anyways, we'll work through that. But
okay.
But insofar as the Devil's Tower goes, it's very interesting. They said they saw a craft, a UFO craft, celestial craft, when they do their ceremonies. So I found that to be very interesting. I don't know if you've heard anything on that.
Oh yeah, that's a power sport. That's probably why Steven Spielberg, selected that particular spot, because it is a UFO spot. And there are UFO spots around here in Sedona, Arizona. There's Bell Rock is a vortex point, and it's supposed to be a UFO hotspot. So these particular power points that the Native Americans have recognized for centuries or thousands of years, they the UFOs tend to show up there around these spots that were sacred to the Native people.
Right. Well, that makes perfect sense. And insofar as the star knowledge goes and the language of the ancients, what is the language of the ancient sky beings, if there is one? Where did they originate from, and what is the culture of the star people?
Well, the Hopi in particular have a relationship with Kachinas. Okay, Kachinas are spirit beings coming from another realm. They're maybe messengers of the gods themselves, and they come down to the people and they help the Hopi every year during the Kachina dances. The Hopi impersonate these Kachinas, and maybe some of your listeners have seen the Kachina dolls that the Hopi carve. There are many different types of Kachinas or spirit messengers. And they're hard to describe because there's so many different types of them. It's basically a mask of one sort or another, and it could be a circular, or it could be dome-shaped, or it could be cylindrical, or sometimes there are horns on the mask, and sometimes there are feathers. Sometimes there are like very large bug eyes, especially for the giants, the giant Kachinas, which there are also giants, the idea of the giants in Hopi mythology. And sometimes they look like space helmets, basically with little slits for eyes, and they're kind of dome shaped on the top, and they look like a space helmet, basically. There's no other way to describe them. But these are the beings that have come down to help the Hopi. They're benevolent beings that help the Hopi with the agricultural process, because the Kachinas start coming to the Hopi mesas after the winter solstice, and they stay pretty much through the agricultural season after the summer solstice and into July, and then they go back to their home, which is the San Francisco Peaks, north of Flagstaff. So they make this migration between the San Francisco Peaks for half the year, and then during the agricultural part of the year, they go to the Hopi mesas, these three primary mesas that the Hopi live on, and which to me it seems like Orion's belt, a terrestrial equivalent of Orion's belt.
It's really fascinating. So it sounds like they are summoning the sky gods, I guess you would call them then, right? Are they the ancestors of the Hopi?
Yes, some Hopi claim that they are the star ancestors that came down in the beginning to teach the Hopi the correct way to live, the way to farm, and so forth. There's also another interesting god that the Hopi interact with, and this god is named Masao. Masao is the god of earth, the god of the underworld, the god of fire, and the god of death. Okay, so he definitely has a link to the spirit world. to the underworld as far as the Hopi are concerned, because the afterlife is basically an underworld.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and this god Masao is a, kind of a strange looking creature. He's got a large bulbous head. His skin is rather rough. He's got very large round eyes. He's got long forearms and long feet, and he's very tall. And his skin is gray. Okay. And in fact, the word Masao comes from the Hopi root mas, M-A-S, which literally means gray. Okay. So, and if you look at, artists have made renditions from descriptions that the Hopi have made of this particular god, and it does indeed look like an extraterrestrial gray.
Mm-hmm.
So, the Hopi have this connection with this very powerful god, Masao. And, some of the Hopi don't like to talk about this god because he is frequently connected with death. Okay?
Interesting.
Death and in the underworld. But, on the other hand, the Kachinas are always seen in a positive light. The Kachinas, it could be a sun Kachina, it could be, all different sorts of Kachinas. They could be animals, they could be any energy in the universe can be represented by a Kachina. And if you go up to watch the Kachina dances, you never know, what Kachina dance they will be, performing at a given time in a given village.
That's so interesting. What about their masks? What do the masks associate with, and why do they wear masks, or do they not wear masks?
Well, they wear masks for the Kachina season for half the year, and then for the other, for the non-Kachina season, which the Kachina season ends in July, and then the non-Kachina season starts, and they have, for instance, the snake dance, where they don't wear masks at all, but they manipulate live rattlesnakes and put them in their mouths, and they're basically snake handlers, and the snake is seen as a positive, unlike the Pentecostalists, Pentecostals. The Hopi see these snakes as a positive being that brings, especially moisture, fertility, and so forth.
Right.
It's not associated with demonic or the devil or anything that the Christian Pentecostals see, the snake as.
Right.
But the Kachinas, they are beneficial. They come to the Hopi. They help them with the agricultural season, and they help to bring rainfall. And that's why the Hopi impersonate these Kachinas during the dance. And the dance lasts all day long, from sun up to sundown. These dances are performed in the village plaza. The dance around and around for hours and hours in the hot desert sun. And it's a very strenuous kind of performance, because they have to keep dancing, and it's almost like when you watch them, it's almost like you could see their feet pressing into the earth, and it's almost like they're pressing the prayers into the earth rather than the way we pray up to the heavens, and we invoke the heavens and so forth. It seems like the Hopi are trying to communicate with these Tellurian spirits in the earth, and to help the fertility, to help the corn grow, because they don't use any irrigation to speak of. Maybe an occasional small dam they will use, but other than that, they use no irrigation. It's all dry farming.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
And it's always very dicey whether they can get the corn to grow or not. But they have survived because of the Kachinas that have helped them out.
Mm-hmm. That's so wonderful, and it sounds like they're anchoring the energy. And I will ask you if you can stay as still as you can, Gary, because sometimes there's some strange feedback around there. Just a heads up for you. But it does sound like the Hopi are actually anchoring the energy through these dances and kind of grounding the celestial energies through their bodies onto the earth. Is that your impression as well?
Excuse me. Let me shift a little bit. I think my chair is squeaking.
Okay. Oh, poor
I was in a chair and it's squeaking a little bit, so maybe that's what you were hearing. So do you want to repeat that question?
Sure. It just sounded like the Hopi dancers actually are anchoring the energies from the heavens down into the earth. When you mentioned they were kind of pressing their feet, it almost sounded like they were becoming conduits to anchor the energy into the earth and maybe perhaps heal the planet. That was my impression. I was just curious insofar as what your take was on that.
Well, yeah, that's exactly right, because the Hopi say that these kachinas come from the heavens. They came from the stars. They are star ancestors. Okay, but they also need the underworld spirits like Masao, who is the lord of the underworld. Basically, he's kind of analogous to the god Pluto in Roman mythology, or Hades in Greek mythology. But they need both the heavens and the earth in order for this whole system to work.
Right.
In order to get this energy down from the stars and into the earth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what is the representation of the blue star Kachina? What is that exactly?
There are some different interpretations of what the blue star is, and it has to do with Hopi prophecy. There's been a lot talked about, at the end of 2012 about Hopi prophecy. Mm-hmm. And, really the Hopi are not that concerned with dating like the Maya were. Even though the Hopi had contact with the Maya, they traded with the Maya. In fact, archaeologists have found parrots, jungle parrots, and macaws in the American Southwest in the graves of the Hopi, the ancestors of the Hopi who once lived there. They found these jungle birds, that originated, 1,500 miles away. They found these buried in the Southwest. So, the Hopi and the Maya traded quite a bit and had traded both, goods, and they also traded ideas. However, I think that the Maya were obsessed with time, whereas the Hopi are not that concerned with time. When you ask a Hopi when this particular world we're living in, which is called the fourth world, when it will end, they won't give a particular date like the Maya did, but they'll just say, well, it's going to be probably within my lifetime, or I can see signs that this age is winding down. Mm-hmm. And one of these signs is the blue star Kachina. The blue star will appear in the heavens, and it'll be a brilliant star. And some say that it'll be a craft that will plunge to the earth and be destroyed. And at this time, the blue star Kachina will take off his mask during a dance. And that means the end of all Hopi ceremonies and the end of the fourth world.
Wow.
And for a Hopi to take off his mask during a ceremony, that would be like a priest taking off his vestments in the middle of Mass and throwing them on the floor. That it would be that radical a thing.
Right.
It just is never done. Regardless of how hot the man is, and there are only men who dance the Kachinas. Regardless of how hot the man is in this mask, he never takes it off during the dance. Mm-hmm. They do have interludes where the dancers will leave the village plaza and go off to a space and rest and take water and so forth. Mm-hmm. But this is just a brief time, and then they'll come back into the village and start dancing again. And I've watched pretty much from sunset to sundown, these kachinas, and it's just a grueling kind of dance that they're doing in the hot summer sun.
Oh, I can imagine. And do they receive visions during those dances?
You know, the Hopi don't talk about the visions the way, say, the Lakota do. You know, I witnessed a Sundance on the Rosebud Reservation, and the Lakota seem to say that they get visions quite a bit. Mm-hmm. The Hopi, that's really not that talked about. If they do receive visions, they're very personal, and they don't really share them, mm-hmm. except with the elders.
I see. And are the elders the ones that actually receive the Hopi prophecy?
Yes, there were a number of elders in the 70s. Okay, and it really started about the 50s when a group in a village called Haute-Villa, a group of elders. They saw that one of their prophecies, which is basically called the Gourd of Ashes prophecy, came to be true. Now, this prophecy had been passed down for hundreds of years, and it basically said a gourd of ashes will fall on the earth, and the fourth world will begin to end, if you see what I mean. Mm-hmm. The beginning of the end of the fourth world will start at that time, when this gourd of ashes falls on the earth. So in 1945, when the Hopi saw that this indeed happened in Japan, in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they said, well, maybe we should start bringing these prophecies to the world because they're being fulfilled, mm-hmm. As right in the moment here. It's not something in the far future. These prophecies are beginning to come true.
Exactly. They surely are.
Yeah.
And when they talk about the worlds, are the worlds representation of dimensions?
The world is basically a world era. Okay, it's an age, a mm-hmm. different age. Just like the Maya have different ages. Mm-hmm. The Maya's age is 5,125 years, I believe, for each age. Again, the Hopi are not specific about how long each age is. But the Hopi have lived through 3 different worlds previously. 3 different worlds have come and gone, and we're now at the end of the 4th world, that many Hopi elders say. Mm-hmm. So,
certainly feels that way.
Yeah, a lot of the prophecies are beginning to come true.
Well, that sounds better. Your sound.
Okay, I'll try to keep as close as I can.
Okay, well, you sounded really good for a second there. I thought you had changed your headset or something.
No.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Let me describe the 4 worlds because it's pretty interesting the way the 4 worlds were destroyed. Mm-hmm. The first world was kind of like if you've seen the movie Avatar, there was a unity between all life on the planet, very ecologically aware culture that respected all life, and this is the way it was during the first world. Mm-hmm. Everyone, basically everyone was a shaman in the first world. They had these shamanic powers. But gradually, there was a devolution of the humankind, and people began to get greedy and so forth. And there was a kind of a sexual and social discord among the people. And gradually, the Creator decided to destroy the first world because it just wasn't working out. Mm-hmm. So the Hopi say that he destroyed the first world by fire. And this could be interpreted as an asteroid strike, or a comet, or a coronal mass ejection, something of that nature. Mm-hmm. And there were very few Hopi that survived this. Okay, and the way they survived is that they went down into caverns. in the Grand Canyon. They went beneath the Grand Canyon, and they survived this cataclysm. And they were led. It's quite interesting. They were led down into these caverns by what they call the ant people.
Right.
The ant people. And I've seen petroglyphs of these ant, rock carvings of these ant people in Arizona here, and they, they look insectoid to me. They look like insects.
Yeah.
And they have antenna and so forth, just like ants, and they're very spindly bodies. Thin arms and legs, like an ant would. But the ant people supposedly took them down into these caverns and taught them how to sprout beans. Beans the beans are basically part of the Hopi diet. Corn, beans, and squash basically was the traditional diet. But the ant people taught the Hopi how to sprout these beans in these caverns so they could survive. And they still have a ceremony called the Puamu ceremony. It takes place in February that commemorates this time when the ant people taught the Hopi how to sprout these beans so they could survive.
Very interesting. And how tall were these ant people?
It's hard to say how tall they were. A friend of mine said he saw an ant person. He's very psychic and so forth. And it kind of short, they really don't describe how tall they were. They might be like 3 or 4 feet tall at the most.
I was just curious about that. And I know you've made mention of when the Hopi depart from this world, they go into the Grand Canyon.
Oh yeah, that's another. Grand Canyon is very important. It's part of their underworld. They came. Let me finish describing the. I've described the first world.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Let me describe the second world because, the second world. A few people survived the destruction of the first world, and then they came up out of the caverns, out of the caves, and they started populating this region again. And then the Hopi started trade networks with other tribes and so forth, and the same thing happened. Humankind began to devolve. Okay, there was always these social discords that people began to be greedy and not going by the way of the Creator, and so the Creator, decided again to destroy the second world, and he destroyed the second world by ice. And some people say that this was a pole shift that caused the ice age to come. And the Hopi also have a conception of these warrior twins, or these twins that sit on the North and South Pole, and they control the rotation of the Earth. And the Creator said, well, I'm going to destroy the second world, and so you warrior twins, you leave your stations on the North and South Pole, and we'll just let the world spin out of balance. So they left their stations for a while, and the world spun out of balance, and there was a massive pole shift, which caused an ice age. And again, the Hopi, the few righteous Hopi, went down into caverns with the ant people. And again, they survived this cataclysm, not by fire, but by ice. So, they again just barely made it, kind of like a bottleneck in their culture. A very few people made it to the third world. Okay, and then the third world, again, this same sort of human nature took over, and the people were greedy and only thought about themselves. And it's interesting that the third world was described as being highly technological, and they had these flying craft. They flew around the world in these flying craft. You know, sort of like the Vimanas of India.
Right.
These flying craft in India, but you know, the Hopi described these, you know, a highly technological society. And it was a global civilization. And excuse me, the Hopi were living at that time. The Hopi were living in the Pacific Ocean. Okay. The Hopi lived on a great island in the Pacific Ocean, which, of course, could be Lemuria, you know, the island of Mu or Lemuria.
Right.
And there are myths of Hopi going across on reed rafts across the Pacific Ocean.
Very interesting.
Going to the west coast of the United States and traveling up the Gulf of California and up the Colorado River and into the Grand Canyon, where they came up out of the earth, out of the Grand Canyon again, and they began to populate the Colorado Plateau. But the third world was destroyed by a great flood.
Wow.
Just like Lemuria is thought to go under. So, you know, it's pretty interesting the way the Hopi conceptualize these world ages, these times that they finally make it out. Apparently, the ant people didn't help them survive the destruction of the third world. They kind of made it on their own, and they took reed rafts and they floated across the ocean.
Wow.
And you know, even today, there's a reed clan and a houseboat clan among the Hopis. There are a lot of different clans, but there, you know, why would there be a houseboat clan in this desert? These desert farmers, you know.
Right. Exactly. And how many Hopi are there now?
There are about 12,000 Hopi.
That's not very many.
No, and spread out. Yeah, they're spread out among about 12 different villages. So, you know, they're on the first, second, and third mesa, and there's an outlying village, Mount Hopi, to the west of third mesa. But, you know, the Hopi are surrounded by the Navajo. Okay? The Navajo came down from the north probably as early as 1300 AD and settled in Arizona and New Mexico. And you know, the Navajo is a huge, it's the largest reservation in the U.S. And you know, the Navajo completely surround the Hopi reservation.
That's interesting.
And they don't always get along. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they intermarry, but you know, there's always been a friction between the Hopi and the Navajo, because the Navajo were the interlopers. They came down and they tended to you know, attack villages and so forth.
Wasn't there a Navajo word for Anasazi or something, which is the ancient word for the ancient enemy or something like that? I know I'm not saying that correct.
Yeah, Anasazi is a Navajo word which means ancient enemy, and it refers to the ancient Pueblo people. The archaeologists call them, now they're calling them, instead of Anasazi, they're calling them ancestral Puebloans. And the Hopi call their ancestors the Kizatsinon, which simply means old ones or ancient ones.
Wow. There's so many languages associated, and of course the star language, when they speak their quote-unquote star languages, are all the reservations connected regardless of what specific tribe there is? Like, would Navajo resonate with the star language of the Hopi?
No, it's a completely different language. You know, and the Zuni has a whole different language. The Zuni Pueblo is in western New Mexico, and in a lot of ways, the Zuni, you know, are like the Hopi. They have kachina dances and so forth, but their language is totally different. And there are other Pueblos in New Mexico. There are a lot of little Pueblos along the Rio Grande, and there's Acoma Pueblo and Laguna Pueblo, and they all speak different languages.
Is there a star correlation the same though with the celestial stars and
You know,
constellations?
I've just found this in Arizona. However, it kind of goes into New Mexico. So I think there was very early on there was a unity of these people that built this star correlation. The largest Pueblo complex in the Southwest is called Chaco Canyon. It's in northern New Mexico, northwestern New Mexico. And I found that that corresponds to the brightest star in the heavens, which is Sirius, the dog star. And you know, my books go into a lot of the similarities between the star Sirius and various aspects of Chaco Canyon that corresponds to both the dog and the bow. A bow is another key symbol of the whole Sirius mythology. You look in a lot of different cultures, and they'll always mention a dog, and they'll always mention a bow. And this holds true for, you know, in China, and I found the same themes in Africa, in South Africa. You know, the dog and the bow are these two themes that are consistent. And in Chaco Canyon, there are a lot of bow-shaped buildings. They built their pueblos that are in the shape of a bow and arrow. And they're like shooting their cosmic energy one direction or another, usually directly north to south. And you know, there's a pueblo called Pueblo Bonito in Chaco Canyon, and it's very oriented. It's oriented very precisely to north and south. Okay, it's like 2/10 of a degree off from true north. Okay, the axis of this building. So they somehow could figure out what true north was, maybe by the pole star, and there are a lot of different theories about how they figured out, you know, what was true north. But this building is oriented, you know, it's like the Great Pyramid in that respect. It's that exact, that precise, oriented toward the cardinal directions.
Fascinating. It's really interesting. And did you are you familiar with the Grand Canyon being well, they considered it to be a trading port at one point? Have you heard that before?
A what?
A trading port, that was used as a trading port at one point.
You mean settlers?
Well, it was more like ancient kind of mythology insofar as kind of a trading port between different races and species, and it's kind of esoteric. I was wondering if you'd heard anything about that. I remember hearing something about that a long time ago. I was wondering what your take is on that.
Well, the Grand Canyon, of course, I mentioned before, is the place where the Hopi came out of the earth. A certain place called the Sipapu or Sipapuni, and this is an actual geological formation that's found on the north bank of the Little Colorado River. It's about 3 miles from the junction of the Little Colorado and the main Colorado River, and it's a limestone dome that's been built up over the ages through mineral water, and it's, you know, it's fairly large. It's about 100 feet across in diameter, and it's perfectly round, and there's a hole in the middle of it. Okay, and you can see this on Google Earth. You can go to this spot and see this formation. It's really strange looking that it looks so perfect. And the Hopi say that they came out of this particular spot on the earth from the underworld, from the third world, coming up to the fourth world. Okay, this is where they came out of the earth and began to populate the Colorado Plateau. But you know, it's the Grand Canyon is the most sacred spot for Hopi because of this place of emergence, this area that they emerged from.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I haven't been there in a long time, but it's quite lovely. And can you describe for our listeners the archaeoastronomy?
Basically, archaeoastronomy is simply the way the ancient people viewed the heavens, mythologically and structurally. You know, today we view the heavens in amazing ways with the Hubble and the Very Large Array and so forth. But the ancient people, the ancient Hopi in particular, they watched the heavens, of course, and they watched where the sun rose on the horizon every day. They had what's called a Tawa Mungwi, or sun watcher, and he would get up before dawn and see where the sun was rising on the horizon at a given day. Of course, it rises due east on the vernal and autumnal equinoxes. But it tends, in the winter, it tends to rise a little farther south on the horizon, and then in the winter, it rises a little farther north on the horizon. And this is a way that they gauged their agricultural calendar. They gauged when to hold certain ceremonies by the sun rising at a given point on the horizon.
Exactly.
And this was part of the winter solstice and summer solstice were very important times for the Hopi and for the Pueblo people. And this is where, the sun, the word solstice, in fact, means sun stands still. That's the literal meaning of solstice. The sun stands, and, for a day or so on the winter and summer solstice, the sun doesn't move on the horizon. And then it starts to move again. And the Hopi said that the sun was either in the winter house or the summer house during the winter or summer solstice. So that's a big part of archaeoastronomy, is to figure out when the solstice days will be according to where the sun is on the horizon. And of course, this was important for the ancient Egyptians as well.
Right. Yeah, they're working with the celestial harmonics of the universe, which is something I think that we've tend to forget here on this planet now, on this timeline. Some people do anyway. Yeah.
Well, it's easy if you live out in the country, as I do, to see the stars. But if you get into the cities, I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and the only Indians I knew were the baseball team. And so, I was completely amazed when I went west for the first time and actually saw some stars.
Right.
And a lot of people don't get the opportunity very much to get out into an area with no city light.
Yeah, I agree. I live up in the mountains too, so I have no city lights, which is really nice. But still,
Right.
you have artificial planes and satellites and all that stuff hanging out there, and so you have to kind of look with sharp eyes, shall we say?
Oh yeah.
Without a doubt on there. And I know we were going to talk a little bit about the Grand Canyon insofar as the caves there and what's been excavated. I know there was talk of some ancient artifacts that were discovered and then kind of covered up.
Yeah, that's a thing I've been working on for a while. It's sometimes called Kincaid's Cave because a guy named G.E. Kincaid supposedly discovered it. It's sometimes called the Lost City of the Dead in Grand Canyon.
Right.
And in October of 1908, a man named G.E. Kincaid took a boat down the Colorado River, and he was a contract worker for the Smithsonian Institute. Okay, and he went from Green River, Wyoming, that's where he started, and he went downstream, down the Colorado River, and he went into the Grand Canyon. Okay, and this was he started in October, and it took him quite a few months to go down, and he ended up in Yuma, Arizona. But he went through the whole length of Grand Canyon in this wooden boat. And he probably was also looking for gold along the way. That's probably one of his things that he was doing. But he came to a spot along what's now called Marble Canyon. This is north of where the Little Colorado flows into the main Colorado. I mentioned that before. Marble Canyon, these huge cliffs go straight vertical up the, it's a kind of a straight drop if you stand at the edge. But he was along the river, and he supposedly saw a cave entrance up on the cliffside, and it was 2,000 feet above the river. And he said, and there was an article in the Arizona Gazette that was published on April 5th, 1909, and this article describes his journey down from Green River, Wyoming, and through the Grand Canyon. And it describes this complex that he found. And this was a front page article in the main Phoenix newspaper of the day. And he saw this entrance in the side of the cliff, and he decided to climb up this cliff. And the article says he made the climb with great difficulty, which must have been a monumental understatement, because it's just a massive to climb from the river up to the place where he went, 2,000 feet straight up. He must have been quite a climber himself.
Exactly.
But supposedly he made the entrance of the cliff, and he said there were like 30 yards of carved stairways leading up to this cave entrance. And he entered into the cave, and it was a rectangular doorway about 12 feet wide. And he went vertically into the side of the cliff. And he went about 60 feet, and he came to a place where it split off into a couple different directions. And he said he saw different rooms, and the rooms had doorways, and they had ventilation shafts. And then he went a little farther along the passageway, and he came to a huge chamber. And the way he describes this chamber, it's like there was a huge chamber with passageways leading out from it like spokes on a wheel. That's the way he described all these passageways radiating from this huge chamber. And he found all these artifacts in this complex. He found copper and gold swords and urns. He found a stone tablet with hieroglyphics on it. He found a dining hall with eating utensils that could, service many, many hundreds of people. And he also found in another room, it's called the crypt. This article says that this room was called the crypt because he found a number of mummies lying on stone slabs. The Egyptian-style mummies lying on these slabs. And, this is unheard of for the Grand Canyon, to find Egyptian artifacts in the Grand Canyon.
Right.
And he also found a life-size marble statue of Buddha sitting in a lotus posture. Okay, that's another thing that he found. Completely anomalous artifacts. Some people call them ooparts, out-of-place artifacts.
Right.
They shouldn't have been. They shouldn't have been in the Grand Canyon.
No, not at all. And how do they get them up there? I mean, that's another thing too. I mean.
Well, yeah, it's hard. They either came down from the rim, which is it's 1,500 feet from the rim to this cave, and it's 2,000 feet from the river up to the cave. So either way, that's quite a trek to get this stuff down there or up there. Either way,
exactly.
And and why they were there, who knows? But this article appeared in the Phoenix Gazette, and it wasn't. Some people have said it was a hoax and so forth, but or just designed to sell papers. And, I'm not totally convinced that this was a valid thing, but we're still on the trail of trying to find this place. I went with a group in May of 2012. We went to the place where we think this cave is located. Now we could go stand kind of above it because it's at a place called the Confluence, where the little Colorado goes into the main Colorado, where the two rivers meet. And it's a straight drop. It's a vertical drop, 1,500 feet.
Wow. Yeah.
And if you have vertigo or anything like that, then good luck. And but we stood at the area and noticed some strange things in the area. Like we found a megalithic site in this area of huge stones that were piled in a circle. Now these stones were 1 to 2 tons. They weighed 1 to 2 tons, and they were piled in a circle for some reason. And the circle was about 70 by 50 feet. Okay.
Wow.
Like an oval, really, more like an oval. But why would anybody pile these stones in this manner? And some of us said, well, maybe the Navajos made a corral out of these huge multi-ton stones. But it would be, to me, it would be much easier to just string some barbed wire fence.
Right. So it's almost like a marker to me.
Yeah, and this was 3 or 4 feet high. This wall that they had built, and we found a smaller one that was about 12 feet in diameter. But why anyone would do that? Some people have said that this is a sacred area where the ancient ones worshipped. And I could see that happening. But,
especially with all the caverns. I'm sure there are caverns in there that haven't been just explored. And also, we talked off air a little bit about the dowsing, and I'm wondering if dowsing would be of any help to you. Looking for
that might be a way to go. We talked about ground penetrating radar.
Right. Yeah.
But from what I understand, that only goes down about 300 feet. And this cave is probably 1,500 feet down from the rim of the canyon. So that probably wouldn't work. We also thought about getting one of those quadcopters, with the a mini helicopter, and putting a camera on it and trying to fly it below the rim to just a video camera.
Right.
And
that's when the drones come in handy, huh?
Yeah. Well, they have these pretty slick quadcopters that you could put a GoPro camera on, and it's a very high def camera, and they have GPS on these things. So we thought about trying to do that as well, to try to find the entrance of this cave.
Exactly. Yeah, it sounds fascinating to me. I have a sense that there's something there. Whether that was a myth or not, I tend to believe that anything is possible. So.
Well, a few things I found out about this particular story. There's a man named Charles Walcott. He was the secretary of the Smithsonian during the time that Kincaid was making this journey. And he would have received any artifacts that Kincaid recovered. Supposedly they went back a second expedition and recovered some artifacts. But this guy, Charles Walcott, would have been one of the people that looked at these artifacts that Kincaid sent back to Washington. And what I found out was 20 years before, when Charles Walcott was about 30, he was in this exact area where Kincaid found this cave. And he had been working for the U.S. Geological Survey. And he was down in there for 1882 and 1883, the winter of. And he was there by himself. There were no other people with him. And he was surveying this exact area. So he might have stumbled on this cave himself and thought, well, I'm going to have to get other people to come back and really look at this cave.
Absolutely. And Gary, we're going to head for a break real quick. We'll be right back, everybody, at Dark Matter Radio. Stay tuned. Welcome back, everybody, to Hyperspace. I'm Solaris BlueRaven, and I'm here with my special guest, Gary A. David. And Gary, that's some fascinating information we were talking about right before that break. You there? And that sounds like
I'm
you're back. There you are.
I'm back, yeah.
All right.
I turned off my mic for a minute, and then I couldn't get it turned on.
Okay. Not a problem at all. It's fascinating information about the Grand Canyon and the Lost City. Without a doubt. And, it's interesting because I've heard old tales coming from my side of the family on my mother's side about ancient caverns and burial grounds and things like that relatives were out hunting or something and they came across an old cave and they found some ancient artifacts and they could never find it again. And they also got spooked going out of there, too. I've heard a lot of stories about that, too. So, it's very interesting. I think there's a lot to be uncovered here in America.
Well, I've heard stories from Nevada of similar sorts of things in the Panamint Mountains. These amazing complexes that supposedly were found and then lost.
Mm-hmm.
They went back to try to find where they were again, and they couldn't find the opening to the cave or so forth. So there are a lot of these stories that persist in the American West about these lost cities, or lost cities of the dead.
Yes, there is. And what about the ancient medicine mounds? Now, were those in correlation to the star maps as well, where they have their burials for, like, say, the Hopi?
The Hopi don't really bury in mounds per se. They have certain spots around the reservation where they bury their dead, certain areas, certain cemetery places.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't really bury the mounds like back east,
right,
in the mound culture and bury the remains in these large mounds. Though I have heard that the Hopi claim to have migrated east, one clan called the Snake Clan. I have heard that they migrated to the east and made it to the Ohio River Valley and into southern Ohio and constructed the Serpent Mound, which, it's an amazing place in itself. These spiral mound of mud. That's one of the Hopi claims, that the Snake Clan went east and built the Serpent Mound. So, the Hopi had migrated a lot of different places before they settled in this area, in Arizona. They went up into Canada, and there have been petroglyphs in Alberta, Canada, the Snake Clan petroglyphs that were found. And like I say, they migrated to the East Coast, to the Atlantic Ocean, and then they also migrated down into the Maya territory, and some of the people stayed there and became the Maya. That's what the Hopi say. That they made this spiral migration across the continent before they finally found the center of the Earth, which is they call the Tuana Savi. That's the center of their cosmos, which are these three Hopi bases that they're still living on, and they've been living on these mesas since about archaeologists say that they started building these pueblos on the mesas about 1100 AD.
Wow.
Okay. Now, pueblos are like stone apartment buildings.
Mm-hmm.
Before that time, the Hopi were in the area, but they lived in more spread out. They lived in what are called pit houses, like single family or clan houses that were more spread out. But around the 1000s and perhaps the 900s, they began to coalesce these buildings into multi-family dwellings, which are called pueblos. And like I say, Chaco Canyon is one example of this huge complex. Pueblo Bonito was 800 rooms back in 900 AD.
Wow.
So, these huge complexes that they began building together, they began to coalesce into these villages, into the Pueblo villages.
Mm-hmm. And is the lineage still strong with the Hopi? I mean, how is the information being transferred from their, say, the grandfathers down to the children?
It's rather tenuous at this point.
Mm-hmm.
The ceremonies are not being performed the way they used to. The elders will say, I've talked with Grandfather Martin Geshwesioma. He's one of the last few elders. He's over 90 years old. Mm. And he says that the youth, the young people, are simply not learning the Hopi language anymore, Because you'll see, if you go to the Hopi reservation, you'll see some people are living in these stone pueblos the way they always did, since 1100 AD, and some are living in trailer houses.
Wow.
So it's a real mixed bag when you go up there, and it's kind of sad to see what is happening. Of course, the culture, a lot of people, you see satellite dishes on houses and so forth. So they're hooked into the culture for sure, the mainstream culture, that is.
Yeah, that's almost sad.
But they're losing their own culture, Solaris. It is sad, and it's really a struggle for the people to keep doing these ceremonies, because it takes a lot of work and a lot of energy and a lot of time, because they have to feed a lot of people during these different kachina dances and ceremonies. They have to feed their family and feed the people in the village, and it takes a lot of energy to prepare for these ceremonies. And of course, the Hopi, some of them go off to Phoenix or Flagstaff to get jobs and to work. It's a real struggle, between the mainstream culture and the original traditional culture.
Right. And somehow I find the original culture to be or a lot more transcendent on so many different levels, when you see.
Oh, yeah. But, the young people are being lured away by video games and all the iPhones and all this stuff, the trappings of the culture at large.
Right.
And it's increasingly hard. And, the elders say that, this is what's going to happen at the end of the fourth world. Our ceremonies are going to fall away. We're not going to do them as we did, quite the way we did them, because the Hopi believe that the reason why they do their ceremonies is not simply for themselves or for their benefit, but it's really to keep the whole world in balance. And if they cease to do these ceremonies properly, or if the ceremonies stop, then the world would be thrown out of balance. Of course, we see a lot of signs that the world is out of balance.
Oh, absolutely! It feels chaotic to me, as far as
the Hopi have a word called Koyaanisqatsi, and this word was made popular really by a film back in 1980, in the 80s. Koyaanisqatsi. It's a masterful film, and the music is by Philip Glass, and it shows the chaos of the modern world. It starts out with the traditional world of the native people, but it shows the chaos of the modern world. And the Hopi are all about balance. They're people of peace and people they like things in balance. And they see the world as being thrown out of balance by a lot of these cultural forces that are assaulting them from the outside world.
Right. Yeah, I see it too. I'm sure we're heading towards another dimensional space, or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, there's definitely some interesting energies afoot these days.
Well, I asked a Hopi friend of mine. He's in his 50s, and I said, "Well, when do you think the fourth world will end?" And he says, "Probably in my lifetime." So it's coming very soon.
Right.
It didn't happen on December 21st, 2012, and many Hopi said it wouldn't be on that date. But we see a transition from chaos, and the Hopi say the fifth world will be much better. It will be a world of peace, a world that is in balance with the earth, with we will get energy, but in a respectful way, not destroying the balance of Mother Earth.
Mm-hmm.
So the Hopi do have a rather optimistic future once we get past this chaotic time, the end of the fourth world, and transition into the fifth world.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. Well, that's good news.
At least there's some hope, yes.
Right. Yeah. Well, it can be kind of grim when you look at it from a different perspective. But I was going to ask you about the Hopi flying shields. Now those are flying saucers, right?
Well, the Hopi have these stories, these legends about flying saucers. They call them flying discs. The Hopi word is Pa'atuvota, which means flying shield. Okay, and they have a lot of these stories about Kachinas, these spirit messengers piloting these flying shields and coming down and assisting the Hopi people. So they've been interacting with these Kachinas, these pilots of these flying shields for millennia, and they're basically they come down and help the Hopi people. They're not malevolent creatures like some ETs are depicted in contemporary culture, but the Hopi see them as basically people that they beings, star ancestors, or beings that they can trust, and they acknowledge the fact that these shields exist and still come to them. And it's kind of interesting that some of your listeners might be familiar with Prophecy Rock, which is a whole other thing. It basically talks about the end of the fourth world in stone, carving on a cliff, on a big, huge boulder. But it's interesting that adjacent to this boulder, that has one of the most important Hopi carvings, you also have this carving of a flying shield. And it looks mechanical. It looks like a mechanical device. And Grandfather Martin talked about what he thinks this means, and he says this is a device to help people talk to each other all over the world.
That's interesting.
But it does look like a flying saucer when you look at the stone carving. It's this ancient stone carving.
That's fascinating. Not a doubt.
The Hopi also have a sky god called Sotuknam, and the sky god is thought to pilot one of these shields. And there's a kind of an interesting legend that involves the sky god Sotuknam and two children. The children were twins, and they were in a village, and this great flood was coming to engulf the village, and everyone was just running around like mad, just running every which way. And in the process, the parents just ran off without knowing where their kids were, and they just abandoned the village because it was going to be flooded. And so these two children, a boy and a girl, decided to head off and try to find the parents. So they went across the desert, and they camped the first night, and they saw a star up in the sky, and the star began to get brighter and brighter and brighter, and finally the star set down on the earth. And this creature came out, and the creature had sort of a helmet, like I described before, a Kachina helmet. They had like slits for eyes, and a round dome-shaped kind of helmet. And this legend describes that the face shone like a star. So this might be a way to describe maybe a visor or some kind of light inside the helmet.
Yeah.
And also, it described the legend described this this being wearing a certain costume that glittered like icicles. Now, if you're a pre-industrial culture, you would describe a metallic costume, a metallic clothing, as like glistening like icicles.
Yep.
And this creature took these two children into this craft that he had set down on the desert, and he took them above the desert, and he fed them melons and corn and squash, and he said that, I will come to you in your dreams to tell you the proper way to live. And he took them above the earth, and they could see where their parents had gone. And so this sky god Sotuknan set the craft down just where the parents were camping, and the children got out of the craft, and the craft went up into the sky, and the children were reunited with the parents. But this is one of the legends that the Hopi have about one of these sky beings, the sky god, coming down in this craft and assisting these two particular children and helping them reunite with the parents.
Right. Yeah, that's really interesting. It almost sounds like a robot from what you're describing.
Well, this was a creature. I don't think it was a robot per se, but it might have had a helmet of some sort.
That's quite interesting, without a doubt.
Yeah, it was looked mechanical. Kind of like one of these masks that the Kachinas wear. So, I'm looking at a picture of one of these right now, and it's very striking. This sky god that came down to help the Hopi people.
And that's what they call them. Did they call them sky gods or star visitors?
Well, this one particular god, it's very early in the creation. He pops up. He is, I believe, they call him the creator's nephew for some reason. But he's very early on. He's there. And another being called Spider Woman is there, and another being, which I mentioned before, Masao, is there. Right at when the people were being created, and the Hopi believe that there are 4 races created out of mud, black, white, yellow, and red. So, but this one sky god, Sotuknan, is a major figure in the pantheon, in the Hopi pantheon. But you have these lesser figures, they're called Kachinas, and they're sort of like angels. It's analogous to the angelic creatures we talk about in the Christian religion and so forth. But they're spirit messengers between the realm of the gods and the realm of the humans.
That's really beautiful. Yeah, I love their ceremonies, and you've attended quite a few of their ceremonies, it sounds like.
Oh yeah. I try to get to the Kachina dances as much as possible, and they're open to the public, but you have to. They're not published on any schedule or anything. You just have to go up there and ask around, where the Kachina dance, because there's usually from like April until July. There are Kachina dances being held in one village or another, every weekend. And you go up there and just ask around, well, what village is the Kachina dance being held today? And you might get an answer or you might not. The Hopi are kind of, they're rather suspect of outsiders. They're rather secretive, but some people are open and want to share the knowledge with the outside world, whereas others are more circumspect, and they will not give you the answer that you want, but you just have to be persistent. You have to have some friends up there to tell you when the Kachina dances are being held.
Right. I suspect being a little bit genuine too. I don't blame them, actually. A lot of different levels.
They've been ripped off for so long. There were ethnographers in the last part of the 19th century and the early 20th century that used to just barge into a Kiva, which is an underground prayer chamber. Just barge in and just they were very rude and disrespectful to the Hopi, and I don't know what they were trying to achieve by this method of just barging into ceremonies. But
right,
especially you have to. Yeah, you have to spend some time with the people and just get to know them. And I try to bring some foodstuffs up, some beans or rice or whatever, every time I go to try to help out the people.
Yeah, I think that's right.
It's a lot of the people are still living. Just they might be growing corn, but that's harder to do all the time.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially with what they're spraying in the air these days, and genetically modified and this and that. So quite a bit. But insofar as the ancient records go now, I suspect the ancient elders are the ones that keep the information. Is it handed down through verbiage, or is there an archive somewhere with this information from their ancestry?
No, unlike the Maya, the Hopi are completely an oral culture. I mean, they hand everything down word of mouth from one generation to another, and that's the sad part, because the linkage is being broken between generations, and it's some of the people I've talked to young Hopi that are carrying on the tradition, that are making the Katina dolls, that are carrying on the ceremonies and so forth. But it's not everyone is like that, and you see a lot of alcoholism on the reservation, and you even see street drugs like crystal meth and so forth.
Oh wow, that's terrible.
Yeah, it's invading everywhere, and it's really you can see why the Hopi think that the fourth world is coming to an end.
Yeah, it's like information's getting corrupted and watered down, and that's not even through the tribes. It's everywhere. I mean, it's just it certainly seems like we need a reset on some level.
Sure. I agree.
Yeah, and you're
fifth world is supposed to be that reset button,
right?
As far as I understand.
Well, that's what it sounds like to me coming down the pike. And your website is theorionzone.com, which I find very interesting, by the way, and I encourage our listeners to go ahead and check out your website. And, of course, your books are available on theorionzone.com. Is that correct?
Yeah, they're all available there. They're available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, at Adventures Unlimited Press.
Great.
And I have a lot of maps on my website, and I have a lot of articles you can download for free.
Yeah, it's
about
incredible.
the Hopi and about the petroglyphs that I've found in this area. I found a star map that reflects all the constellations that are in the winter hexagon, carved on a huge boulder.
Yeah, I was looking at those petroglyphs, and what they remind me of? Some of them remind me of a map of the universe when you look at them. It's really interesting. It's almost like you can look at those and then kind of look up at the stars and correlate the energetic.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think this particular map that I found does relate to the constellations particularly. And, you can see clan symbols, different bear clan and so forth, different symbols that they carve on the rock. And, it's just fascinating the amount of... And really, that's the written record of the Hopi. They don't have a language written down per se, but they have images on rock faces that you can still find quite a bit of in northern Arizona.
Yeah. What about the medicine women and the healers? Are they still pretty prominent around there?
Yeah, the women have their own particular ceremonies. In the fall, like the basket dance, and the harvest ceremonies are dedicated to the women. So, the women take over during that part of the year pretty much. And it's a matrilineal and matriarchal society. The women own the houses, and the women take care of the houses and own them, and the men just work in the fields and so forth. They take care of the fields, and they go in the Kivas. But the women, it is a matriarchal society, so it's very strong women power there.
That's great. And do they have a lot of? Are they superstitious at all, or when it comes to certain type of spirits or anything like that?
Well, I would say that there's some sorcery going on, and you kind of have to watch. You kind of have to watch out for sorcerers that really you might be in jeopardy. They might try to kill you if you cross them wrong.
That's interesting. Like skinwalkers, or
they're very much like skinwalkers. The Hopi have their own. The Ya Society is one of what they call them in the Hopi. But they're. And I've kind of experienced a negative thing myself. I went to a Kachina dance at a Hope Villa, and I parked my car in the wrong place, and the Kachina dancers were taking a break, and they really looked at me askance. So I moved my car very fast, But it turns out that I went to the Kachina dance and spent all day drinking enough water, I thought, but I went back home to Flagstaff, and I just collapsed the next day. And I was admitted to the hospital. I had a near-death experience, and I saw I was floating above my body, and that whole experience.
Oh my goodness.
My liver shut down, and it was just really kind of I think that there was some sorcery going on, because a couple guys kind of crossed me and kind of they were hassling me, and I think they might have been sorcerers. I don't know, but
that's wow.
That does happen up there.
Yeah, I consider them to be more peaceful, but I guess they do have the warrior streak.
Yeah, and the whole Tony Hillerman has a lot of books mainly about the skinwalkers and the Navajo version of these sorcerers. But the Hopi have them as well.
Well, that's really interesting. So I guess you weren't going through a detox, right? That was something negative.
That was pretty negative. I almost died.
My goodness. Well, I'm glad you didn't. It's pretty intense. Wouldn't want to be experiencing that without a doubt. And on these ancient sites, do they have vortexes that they open up?
A lot of people talk about the Sedona vortexes, and you can really feel the Sedona. That was a power spot,
right.
And that might have been an ancient Hopi site. They call it Palatquapi, the Red City of the South, and this might be the Sedona region, the Red Rock region of Sedona. And with all the vortexes, you can actually feel the energy there, the different energy, depending on what vortex you're at.
That's very true.
It's very, very powerful there, and Grand Canyon also, is very powerful. I went to Grand Canyon one time, and my wife stayed back at the car because she was tired, and I went out on this little bit of land and sitting right on the edge of Grand Canyon. And I saw these luminous balls of light just dancing across these mesas in the middle of Grand Canyon, and they were dancing. They were kind of day glow green and purple, and they were just kind of going from one mesa to the other and just dancing across the mesas. I can describe it. But so there's a lot of energy that you can feel coming right out of Grand Canyon. If you sit at the edge and you're quiet and you're meditating, you can feel the earth energy just radiating out of the canyon. And it's so peaceful and so beautiful.
Yeah, it really is. I'll have to get back over there. And I'm sure it hasn't changed a whole lot over the years, has it? The Grand Canyon?
Well, the tourists are a problem all the time. You get busloads of people, but you can get off by yourself and find a quiet spot. It's big enough you can do that.
Mm-hmm.
But I should mention this one threat to the Grand Canyon. It's by this place where Kincaid's Cave is supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
There's a corporation called Confluence Partners that want to build a monstrosity down in the Grand Canyon.
Oh.
It's going to be a restaurant down at the bottom of the canyon, and it's going to be a walkway, a river walkway along the Colorado River, and there's going to be a hotel on the top and a tramway, gondolas going down to this restaurant on the bottom of the canyon.
Mm.
And I advise all your listeners to go to savetheconfluence.com.
Mm-hmm.
This is a group of Navajos that are fighting this particular enterprise because it's on Navajo land. You know, some of the Grand Canyon is on Navajo land. Mm-hmm. And some of the Navajos want this project to go through. It's called Grand Canyon Escalade. Mm. And it's a whole project that will completely destroy the canyon as a sacred place.
Exactly.
For both for the Hopi and the Navajo, because not only is Kincaid's Cave located very close to there, the Hopi Sipapuni, the place of emergence, is very close to where this complex is supposed to be built.
That's interesting.
And it would just be a tragedy if this thing went through.
Right. Yeah, I'm wondering if it's a coincidence or not, if they're, digging on purpose, perhaps?
Some of my group has speculated that they want easy access to Kincaid's Cave. Mm-hmm. And that's why they're building this complex there. They could very easily, because it's within a mile of where we think Kincaid's Cave is.
Oh, wow. That's close.
Yeah, it's that close. Mm-hmm. I mean, you could throw a stone at it and probably hit Kincaid's Cave from the rim, where they want to build this complex. Mm-hmm. So it's apparently moving forward. There's a group in Scottsdale, Arizona, that want to push this thing, and they'll bring a few minimum wage jobs to the area, but and there's always the thing, where they're going to get the water to do this.
Exactly. Well, that's a shame.
So this is a fight that we continue to wage. Trying to stop this, along with this Navajo group, the SaveTheConfluence.com.
Mm-hmm. Definitely check into that for sure. Well, I hope they don't build down there. That would be awful.
Well, it'd be worse than the skywalk at the other side of at the western edge of Grand Canyon. There was that glass skywalk.
Is there music?
Yeah, I'm sorry. My phone is ringing. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I bet you never had that happen.
Oh, no. It's live radio. Anything can happen, right? Yeah, well, good grief. That's all I have to say about that. But, yeah, we'll check that out and see if we can't put a stop to all this excess. That's what it sounds like. And so far...
Yeah. It's a constant struggle, with anything. When I was in South Dakota, I was with a group of Lakota that helped stop the Honeywell Corporation from putting a radioactive bomb testing site in the sacred Black Hills, and we were successful. There was so much bad press that they just pulled out of the whole thing. It was the Honeywell Corporation from Minneapolis. They went in there and were real slick in trying to get the project to go through, and it would have brought 5 jobs to the area. And it's just we did sweat lodges and so forth, and met with the Honeywell Corporation in teepees and got the thing stopped.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, that's one of the few success stories that I've experienced in the environmental realm. But
it's good. Well, any little improvement is better than them just monopolizing everything.
Yeah. We make these small strides, and I think people are slowly coming around. Mm-hmm. even though it's a constant battle.
Well, it's that thing where you don't appreciate something until it's gone, and I think that's what's happening to our environment right now. So, it's easy to take for granted the beauty of things until you don't have it. So, people need to respect that a little bit more. There's that saying, walk gently on this earth, and I really resonate with that. I think that we need to have a little more respect for the earth itself.
Well, yeah, it's a living creature. It's a living being.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just a dead mass of, it's not a dead planet. It's a living ecosystem.
Exactly. And with these anomalies that, these vortexes we were talking about, are they natural, or do you think they're actually being created by the tribes themselves?
I think the tribes gravitated to these places. I think they're, they might have some interdimensional origin. Mm-hmm. Maybe some of the Kachinas created them there for a certain purpose. But I think the tribes just gravitated to places like Sedona and to the three Hopi mesas, which, if you go there, you look out across the Arizona desert and you're looking on eternity, really, a spatial version of eternity, because you can see so far and it's so peaceful. And you could see why the Hopi were attracted to this area. Mm-hmm. That is very dry. There were just marginal springs in the area. There's no running river by the three Hopi mesas. Mm-hmm. They relied on intermittent springs, and and to a certain extent they had cisterns. They dug cisterns into the rock to catch the water. Mm. But they wanted to be really out there by themselves, and it was a good thing because the development of culture went by them because they were so far out in the desert. Mm-hmm. Unlike the Lakota Sioux, which had a lot of gold in the Black Hills, and that triggered the gold rush, and they really clashed with the Lakota people because of this gold that was there that the white settlers wanted. Mm-hmm. The Hopi, on the other hand, there's not much out there of value, of material wealth, of value that the mainstream culture would want.
Right, it's more mystical, I would suspect. And also, we were talking about those aquifers off air a little bit, but you would think that they would have aquifers underneath where they're located.
Well, like I said, they relied on springs, mm-hmm. and sometimes the springs went dry, but there was no river really, and they didn't really dig wells. Mm-hmm. They just relied on the spring water to. And usually a village would have a spring nearby. They built these villages with that in mind. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of abandoned villages on these three mesas. They built for a while, maybe at the base of the mesa, and then they built on top of the mesa. So there are ruins all over the Hopi land. Mm-hmm. Different ruins that are abandoned, but the Hopi don't consider them really abandoned because the spirits are still there. The ancestors are still living in a particular village.
Right, and the ancestors connect in because they're doing ceremony?
Oh, yeah, the ancestors are always very close. The Hopi consider the ancestors as being a part of the clouds, okay? The ancestors come to them as clouds that rain on them. And this is part of their conception of the cosmos, that mm-hmm. The clouds are just not weather phenomenon, but they are the ancestors coming to them to bring them rain. Mm-hmm. So they come up out of the earth and become clouds to bring them rain.
It's interesting. I wonder what they think of the manufactured clouds, like the chemtrails and things like that, and the weather modification.
I don't think they're too fond of those, or even the contrails. Mm-hmm. Webs in the sky is one of the prophecies.
That's right, it is, isn't it?
Yeah, one of the Hopi prophecies. There are a bunch of Hopi prophecies.
Can you go down a list or give us a few more?
Well, there's one that happened a few years ago, the Gulf oil spill. Mm-hmm. The Hopi said that the sea will turn black and all the creatures in it will die. And this just happened a few years back. That's one of the prophecies. There are different prophecies, but mainly they think that all these weather phenomena are a part of the end of the fourth world. The earthquakes, tsunamis, all this chaotic upheaval. That's part of the end of the fourth world.
Mm-hmm. So I tend to agree with that. And also, there's a connection with Mothman and the Hopi. Is that correct?
Well, I wrote about the Mothman in terms of this one place in New Mexico called Pottery Mound. Okay, it was a Pueblo, and they would live there in about 1300 A.D. And they painted these beautiful murals of moth-human hybrid creatures. They looked humanoid, but they had moth wings and a moth head. Okay, and these beautiful, colorful murals were painted on the side of a kiva wall, and a lot of archaeologists, studied these things and drew pictures of them. So we have these still. You can still look at pictures of these, but they covered over the actual kivas because they wanted to preserve them for the future. Or they bulldozed them over, but a lot of these they conceptualize a Mothman as part of their culture, and it's my belief that they also were taking datura seeds and eating. That's the moonflower. It's also called, or Jimson weed. It's a hallucinogen.
Okay.
And archaeologists have found the seeds there in this particular Pueblo at Pottery Mound, and they found evidence that it was being consumed there, and this hallucinogenic plant, and the moths are very attracted to these white flowers, these huge white flowers that bloom at night. Okay. So there might be a connection between this particular ingestion of Jimson weed and the painting of these Mothmen. There are a number of paintings of these Mothmen.
Wow. Yeah, it sounds like it's connected with what they're ingesting. No doubt. That's very, very interesting, though. Yeah, think about was it John Keel who did the Mothman?
Oh yeah. And it's very much. It looks very much similar to what I've seen the picture of the statue in whatever village in West Virginia. There's one in West Virginia that has a festival every year, the Mothman Festival.
Oh, that sounds like fun.
And it, of course, goes along with the Mothman prophecy movie.
Yeah, it's very ominous, isn't it?
Oh, it is. Yeah, it's kind of a scary aspect of at least the culture out here. The Hopi are not real big on, or at least the Hopi now are not real big on ingesting peyote or datura or anything. They pretty much these days avoid that sort of thing. But maybe in the past it was different.
Right. I thought they used to do a lot of ceremonies with peyote and things like that. Or maybe it was a different tribe.
Yeah, that's a lot of the Yaqui. Carlos Castaneda had a series of books about the Yaqui and the different psilocybin mushrooms and peyote rituals. And that's well known. The Huichol in Mexico, that tribe, also did a lot of peyote. But it seems like the Hopi weren't that involved in the whole aspect of hallucinogens. In fact, there have been some ethnologists that have claimed that the Hopi are kind of an island, a Apollonian island in a Dionysian sea. Dionysus was the god of ecstasy and wine and of course psilocybin mushrooms. That sort of thing, but Apollo was the god. These anthropologists described him in Greek terms, of course. But Apollo was the god of reason and kind of sober and just always acting in a rational manner. And the Hopi are kind of that way. They're kind of they don't go in for a lot of passion or a lot of ecstasy in their dancing. Their Kachina dancing is very reserved. Like I said, they press the prayers into the earth with their feet, and they don't. It's very unlike the Lakota sun dancing, which is very extroverted, and it kind of splits the sky with their prayers. The Hopi are much different, and I think the character of the Hopi of being reserved, being polite, being not going in for a lot of vision questing things,
right.
are not a part of the Hopi culture.
Yeah, they sound very grounded, very anchored to the earth.
They are anchored really well in the earth. They're in their agricultural cycle and in their ritual cycle, doing the ceremonies, one after another, doing them as well as they can.
That sounds very pretty. Yeah, and they talk about the whirlpool in the sky. What exactly is that?
Well, I've written about this in terms of the Orion constellation, and this has to do with a book called Hamlet's Mill, and it gets really complicated, but there might be a kind of a portal, a portal in this whirlpool by the left leg of Orion, by the star Rigel. There's a group of stars called Eridanus, the river, and this whirlpool is supposed to be in this one area by the Orion constellation. Okay. So there might be a kind of portal in this region, according to a lot of ancient people.
That's interesting, like a Stargate.
Yeah, Stargate. Yeah, exactly.
That's fascinating. Highly possible, without a doubt. And so far as these celestial beings go that interact with the people of this world, do you think it's a universal thing, or do you think it's just Hopi specific?
Oh no, I think it's all native cultures do this. Like the Dogon are very similar to the Hopi in the kind of mask, the Dogon of Mali. They wear these masks, these very bizarre masks, and they got their information from these beings called the Nomos that came down and taught them what they know. They're kind of like the Kachinas of the Hopi.
Right.
And they knew about the Sirius B before it was known by astronomers. They knew that this Sirius B was a dwarf star, an invisible dwarf star. They also knew about Sirius C, which has only been discovered in the mid-1990s. There's a third dwarf star called Sirius C that nobody knew about, but the Dogon, they knew about that, and it's in their mythology. It's woven very heavily into their mythology, and they have a lot of metaphors of different types of grain relating to these dwarf stars. But that's just one example of ancient people relating to these star beings, these ancient creatures that came down from the heavens.
Yeah, it's like a universal language. And I'm wondering if these different species, these off-world species, whatever you want to call them, have a different name to each culture, but actually are the same original race. Would you say that that's true or no?
I think there are similarities. They might not be the same. if you have read any of Credo Mutwa, he's a South African Sangoma, and he talks about these really bizarre creatures that are different types of interdimensional creatures. And he did mention the fact that that these creatures are somewhat like the Hopi of Arizona. He pointed out the Hopi as being similar to these creatures that he has seen. He had personally seen these creatures as a shaman and a medicine person. So,
Yeah.
And he said that some of the Africans, of course, do the mass dancing, much like the Hopi.
Mm-hmm.
So there are similarities, I'm sure.
That's very, very interesting. Well, my goodness, we're almost getting ready to wrap this up pretty soon here. But Gary, I just wanted to thank you for being on the show tonight. It's been incredible to have you on, and I very much appreciate your information. It's been just very, very interesting to listen to you talk about all this information. And once again,
My pleasure to be here.
Let me know what's coming down the road for you. I know you're a musician also. What music do you play?
I play blues and I play classic rock.
That's
and,
awesome.
I've been a musician for longer than I want to admit.
I think that's great.
But I'm still playing in the area in a band right now. So.
Nice.
If you come to Prescott, Arizona, you just might catch my band.
All right. What's the name of the band?
Called Silverback.
Nice. Excellent. I'll definitely have to tune into that. And also, do you have any speaking engagements or anything coming down the road?
Well, I'm scheduled to go to Serpent Mound in June on the summer solstice to speak there at a conference. That's the next thing coming up.
That sounds great. And when is your new book coming out?
It should be out within a few weeks. I'm
Okay.
still doing the proofing of it, and it should be out very soon. And it's available. It will be available on Kindle and Amazon, both printed and Kindle.
Yeah, that sounds like a fascinating read. I'll have to pick a copy of that one up for sure. And also your website, of course, the OrionZone.com website. Yeah, that's awesome. And I was going to ask you a little bit about the Thunderbird. Is that significant to the Hopi at all?
Not the Thunderbird, but it's very significant to the Lakota Sioux.
Okay.
The Thunderbird is a major figure for the Lakota.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was curious about that. That image comes in a lot, and I was wondering about that for sure. Is there anything else we didn't get to cover that you wanted to address real quick before we get ready to get out of here soon?
Well, I just want to thank you for having me on, and I urge people to go to my website, theorionzone.com, and download some of the free articles I have on there. And just you can see what I'm up to, and there are a lot of maps on the website that you can see this Orion correlation that I've been talking about, and how the stars match up with the different villages on the Arizona desert.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I was looking at those star maps, and I could stare at those things for hours. It's quite interesting, without a doubt. And I was going to ask you, do you use any type of, was there a sound associated with the ancient sky gods? Not you necessarily, but was there some kind of a sound that was used?
Well, they have different songs for the kachina dances, and they're all geared toward that particular kachina. So, that just to learn those songs is a challenge to do the kachina dances.
Okay, and is there any record of the craft making any kind of a sound or tone musically?
Well, yeah, there is. Some of the legends talk about mechanical types of whirring and humming, and something you wouldn't expect from a kind of organic or interdimensional. It's almost like it's a physical craft that is setting down. And there's one flying shield that could find its way home. It's kind of like a built-in GPS.
That's very interesting. Yeah, the more you look into that, the more it's really fascinating, without a doubt. And I know we talked a little bit about the Hopi receiving their visions, and of course they didn't use any type of any type of drug to do that. So is it based more like on their dancing and they're going into a trance?
Yeah, to dance in the hot desert sun for 12 hours that must have been, that is a challenge. It still is. They're still doing dances. They will start up, next month in the village plazas, and to dance all day in the hot desert sun. You've got to be in a trance. You've got to be in another world.
Yeah. Do they actually fast before that?
Oh yeah, they fast beforehand, and there's quite a bit of preparation. There's a couple weeks preparation for each dance. There's a lot of making of feathers, prayer feathers, and making of kachina dolls and so forth.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. Well, I wish you all the best in all of your research, and I hope to meet you sometime out there in Arizona. If you do another one of those groups where you're actually going into the Grand Canyon, let me know.
Well, it's coming up. Hopefully in May, we'll be going again. So.
Excellent. Very good. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening. Have a great week. Thank you.